A very good morning, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, friends, and colleagues. My name is Foli Batibo, Senior News Anchor at Al Jazeera English, and it is my honor to moderate this Solution Spotlight solution session on behalf of the Spotlight Initiative, the United Nations High Impact Initiative to End Violence Against Women and Girls, organized with the Qatar Fund for Development in partnership with the Qatar Fund for Development here at the Second World Summit for Social Development. Our thanks to all of you who've made this gathering today possible. Today's session on investing in adequate social protection for women and girls to drive meaningful change across all the sustainable development goals couldn't be more relevant and more timely. We are living in challenging times, and it's easy to lose sight of progress. But if we invest in people, especially in women and girls, we see that progress is possible and that every sustainable development goal comes within reach. So we have a fantastic lineup today of leaders and advocates who will share their own experiences and insights on how social protection for women and girls changes communities and countries for the better. It is my honor to begin the session with an inspiring leader who has consistently championed women's empowerment as a foundation for peace, resilience, and sustainable development. Please join me in welcoming the co-chair of Spotlight Initiative's governing body, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Amina Mohammed. Good morning, DSG. That's what we call her, DSG. We are here at the Second World Summit for Social Development, 30 years after Copenhagen. What would you say has been the biggest progress made for women and girls in ending violence for women and girls, and what remains the biggest challenge 30 years on?
Progress. I love it that we talk about the progress, because we're certainly not where we were 30 years ago. There are many more girls and women who have acquired an education and have put it to use. Many more have gone and still go into a medical facility and come out alive. The maternal mortality rates were huge in my country alone. They were 1,200 per 100,000 just a few years ago. They're down to what they should be better, so I won't mention the figure, but it is under 500. And child mortality. We have many more empowered in terms of their connection to market. And there's visibility on really important issues like gender-based violence that has become what we would say a silent, hidden crisis. It's much more spoken about. And perhaps for me, what have we really done? In the health sector, we have brought the head back on the body, and we talk about mental health in a way that recognizes that it's okay not to be okay.
But 30 years on, DSG, we're still seeing alarming rates of violence and sexual violence in particular against women and girls in conflict zones. When you turn on the news today, you hear alarming reports, horrifying reports of women and girls being raped in Sudan, for example. How do you respond to that crisis today? What can we do differently for those women and girls in conflict zones?
Well, we're here today because of the Spotlight Initiative, and it is about gender-based violence. And when we first started this, it was not looking at the conflict zones, even though we knew that in conflict zones it is a space of violence, right? And therefore one would expect that. I think first and foremost, in many of those cases, the leadership that is interacting with that violence, is leading that violence, needs to say that there has to be, as they say, there is, even amongst thieves, there's honor. There needs to be a code of conduct. You need not to touch women and children in any conflict. This needs to be off limits. And the violence itself, this is violence not instigated by women, right? It's men. And so men need to know that when they come back from war, they're heroes. But women are broken, discarded, raped, and don't often are recognized at all out. So I think that we have to We have to call upon all the tools that we have that we don't use. We have to hold people accountable. We have to bear witness, and we have to come forward with what has happened and not let people get away with the atrocities that happen on the shoulders, the back, the persons of women and children. It has to be, we have to have outrage.
Right.
And I do not see the outrage for women in conflict situations where these atrocities are spoken to.
Right. Let's talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. You are the champion of the SDGs at the United Nations. Why are gender-responsive social protection systems so critical for the SDGs?
Well, for
To
us,
achieving the
well, we're not
SDGs.
going to achieve them when half the population is not in the mix. And I think that's what we need to understand, that it is about half the population. It is also about we say human rights, and they are women's rights, and those rights to be part of a nation that is being built, rebuilt, that is aspiring for so many things that only men have the privilege of: access to jobs, access to education, to the digital world that we're now going into. We won't thrive without women.
Right.
And I think that it's important to see us in leadership, in shaping the agenda. You cannot be prescribed a solution to your predicament if you're not involved. And you've got to be there at the table. You've got to shape the agenda at the beginning. Often we are said to be at the table, but we're discussing already what has been designed for consultation. No, we need to be there co-creating it. We need an intergenerational dialogue, because not enough young people at the table when this is happening. What we should bequeath as a generation, let me talk about mine, because we're always talking about Gen Zs, but I don't know what we're called, Gen Old. But we need to understand that we do not hand our baggage to the next generation, that they have their visions. They have, I guess, this sense of urgency. They have new technology, and so they really do need to be there defining what that means. I think they have a better chance where men and women will do this. I look at Qatar, and I come in here and I see incredible women, young women, who are participating in their nation building, but they're doing it with young men.
Right.
And they're doing it with men who are also leading. And I think this is a good example of what can be.
Right.
It doesn't happen a day. But it should, and I think that now's the opportunity.
And the importance of partnerships, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
partnerships between the governments, of course, civil society, the private sector. That's what the Spotlight Initiative is about. Why do you think these broad partnerships are the future of social change, especially when it comes to protecting women and girls?
Well, it's a reflection of who is in that society, right? I mean, the private sector is not outside of it. And often, if they're not brought in, they will be an impediment to women succeeding and moving forward with leadership. So everyone needs to be in the mix. If this is to be an inclusive economy, an inclusive society that preserves the good in its traditions and moves forward in solid foundations, then every constituency needs to be heard. And they all bring a different value to what happens as we grow, as we frame an inclusive economy. Without civil society that really do represent the issues, without business that in fact works on the bottom line but needs to consider now the environment, needs to consider its social responsibilities, and that it is actually a member of that society, just might be private sector.
So how do you then convince countries to invest more in women's and girls' protection? Because there are examples out there that show that investing in women and girls' protection moves the needle not just on one SDG, but on several at the same time, right? So how do you convince governments who may think they have other priorities that this is the best way forward?
I think we have to use the data and the evidence, and there's a lot of it out there. And if we don't do that, then you're not very convincing. So it's not about what I think. This is the evidence. This is the way we've been able to move with climate change. And so this is what we should also do. There's a lot of evidence out there of the value of investing in women. But beyond the evidence, it's a right. And we have, governments come in, leaders come in, and their first obligation is to the safety, the security, the prosperity of their people, 50% of which are women. And every now and again, remind them. But it's also about how those leaders come in and that their cabinets, their front office, that they encourage that leaders in the banking industry, in the private sector, also bring in women into leadership. And that's important. You might be elected to office, but you have the opportunity to select your cabinet. And you can bring women into that space. And women not as tokens, but in important decision-making sectors that affect the larger, population. And often the issues are about women today.
Are you
We're still
seeing
behind.
political buy-in right now? Depending on the regions in the world, do you feel like that there are certain regions where finally we're getting it, and that there are others that could be doing better? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but
I think that in every region there are countries that we can say this is a race to the top, but yet you look at the indices and it's not a parallel that you put women in leadership and then suddenly investment comes rolling in. These are different considerations. So I do see in Africa, in Asia, in Europe where women are leading and where we see more in decision making, but it is not the norm. And I think that we need to do far better. And I can point to my country, and I can point to Somalia. Somalia is doing a great job in the conflict that they're in. They've met the quotas for the parliament. Yes, they've had horrendous situations there where they've lost parliamentarians, women parliamentarians. But I look to my 469 members in the Senate and the House, and I think I'm not above 30. No, so I'm really far behind. Explain to me why my country, 242 million people, would have that level of representation in the parliament and even less in the cabinet. And I really would just, push to say to leaders, you are missing a whole lot here. You are far behind and could do so much better if you did have women in those roles.
right. And so what do you see as the biggest challenges today for ensuring that every woman and girl can benefit from social protection, and where do you see the most hope or the most innovation for achieving this?
I think there's a lot of innovation on the continent of Africa. I think it has social protection flaws, and that's what it needs to be. It cannot just continue to be projectized. You need to find sustainability. As a nation's growing, it needs to take much more cognizance of those that are being left behind. And so social protection programs that are designed on the basis of a percentage of GDP were really important. That's the sustainability. Hard to do because we're often seeing many countries that are struggling with the debt that they have to service and a social protection or education or health investment that they need to make. So there are many countries with the tensions of having to make choiceless choices, and we need to try to reverse that. That's a much more complex, broader issue of what the international community needs to be doing and continuing to meet its commitments for financing the development agenda.
Right. The Second World Social Summit for Development in Doha has seen the adoption of the Doha Political Declaration. How do we make sure that this declaration protects women and girls in a meaningful way? Not just another declaration, but that it has impact for women and girls.
Well, the Doha Declaration has to be one of implementation. I mean, we made promises 30 years ago, and we've come back and seen them embedded in the Sustainable Development Goals and the Pact for the Future. And I think we need to go out saying, what do we need to do with what we have in terms of implementation? And then we begin to build on that. Because I often, see us go out and we're waiting for manna from heaven. It ain't coming. In fact, it's regressing. And what we need to do is that how do we better use the resources we have, more efficiently see the integration of an investment, make one in agriculture, and you will find that over many of the sectors, in health, in education, you will benefit, women will benefit. Have a metric that really pushes us for the outcomes of what we do when we go home, that they land in the lives of women. So it's not about a woman's project. It's about a food systems project and how many women it impacts. It's about recognizing that within certain spaces, women live in fear. They're not able to participate in the food systems transformations of their countries because 3 days out of the week, they're recovering from gender-based violence. And so how do we then recognize that and find a solution to it? Either it's in the law, it's the society, it is a leader deciding that they're going to have zero-based violence in their communities. And we've seen this work when leaders get into a subject that is perhaps not seen or taboo. They bring visibility, and they also bring a sense of this is not acceptable in our society, and therefore we can bring an end to it. We saw this in HIV and AIDS in many of our countries,
Right.
and we can do this with gender-based violence.
Thank you so much, DSG.
Welcome.
Thank you for your inspiring words and reminding us what leadership in action really looks like. Thank you very much. As you can imagine, the Deputy Secretary General has an extremely busy schedule, so we are especially grateful for your time today. Thank you again for joining us and for your motivating contribution. Thank you. A round
Thank
of
you,
applause,
Folly, and
please,
thank
for
you,
the
everyone.
DSG. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. That was a great conversation, no doubt, with the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, which perfectly sets the tone for our next high-level panel, a distinguished panel of leaders and change makers who will help us unpack how exclusive gender-responsive social protection can drive peace, stability, and sustainable development. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Ms. Shera Alia Al-Thani, Deputy Director General of the Qatar Fund for Development, Ms. Erin Kenny, Global Coordinator of the Spotlight Initiative, and Ms. Seraphine Wakana, the United Nations Resident Coordinator in Sierra Leone. A round of applause, please, for our panelists. Thank you all for being with us. I love that we have an all-female panel. It's always good. I will start, and very multicultural too, representing several regions of the world, right? I will start, I guess, with the same question that I asked the Deputy Secretary General. We're now 3 decades on from the Copenhagen Declaration. And a generation later, we've seen real gains. Millions of women and girls have achieved amazing things. There have been exceptional gains, but a lot of women and girls around the world still remain left behind. So, Haya, let me start with you first. How do you think we move on from Copenhagen? What have we learned? What has worked and what hasn't worked? What should we do differently after Doha?
Well, first of all, it's the DSG set sort of an eagle-eye view of the situation. The context is clear to us. The difficulties, the obstacles are clear. It's about collective action at this point. It's about us coming together. There's money as such has never been an issue. Money is available, and it's about aligning resources with those that are driving change on the ground. And the problem is about accessibility of funds. But also it's about centralizing women in any and all policy-making decisions. There are a lot of examples, and especially at Qatar Fund for Development, in which we played a role in empowering women. And we have our initiative for women in conflict zones that specifically targets empowering women in the context of conflict and post-conflict areas. But the issue usually is about listening. It's about, there is an initiative actually that's giving cash to people on the ground. And when you listen to women and you talk to them in those contexts, they would tell you, we don't want to get any cash. Can you believe it? They're pushing away that resource because it's not secure. And so just applying something or going into any context and believing that what works with one context will work elsewhere is not usually the case. So it's listening, it's allowing them to be part of the solution and part of also the policy. Mm-hmm. And it's also then about, being or reinforcing the need for having them on the table. I believe the DSG spoke very clearly about that, but it's about having, when you're in a room and you don't see any women voices, it's about requesting that and being an advocate for women. Whether, you're in a position of power or you're a driver on the ground for change, it's very important to have inclusivity in decision-making to be able to see actual plausible changes on the ground. So again, as the DSG has said, we are much better off than where we were 30 years ago, but there is still a lot to be done. And it's about centralizing those core developmental requirements, education, healthcare, access to those things equitably. That is what will drive us further and further, and hopefully we'll realize the Doha political declaration.
Thank you so much for that, Haya. Erin, let me come to you next. As Haya said, we're much better off than where we were 30 years ago, but there's still a lot to be done. So how do you think we ensure that the next decade delivers the transformation we've long promised women and girls?
Yeah. I think about 1995 and what emerged from that time, because we were embroiled in several really pivotal conflicts. And it was really the first moment when the terminology of rape as a weapon of war was coming into the forefront, coming out of Bosnia, out of Rwanda. And it led to a whole categorization of a type of violence and a movement to address violence in the context of conflict, which was a really important moment. It actually was the time I was just graduating from university that year, and that was actually what launched my career in Bosnia in this field of work. But what also started happening, despite what we knew at the time, what women's rights groups had been telling us, and what was well codified, was a real fragmentation of work that continues to plague us today. And I think particularly in this resource-constrained moment that we're in, this time when everyone started to really kind of define their little corner of the world, their corner of the work, and say, okay, this is my piece. I do health response. I do just conflict-related sexual violence. And it really led to us all neglecting the drivers of violence, whether we're working in a conflict zone or in a peaceful society, are basically the same. And the response, the approach we need to take has to consider multiple factors and be, by its very nature, multi-sectoral. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach at all, but it has to be grounded in national priorities. It has to consider what governments are saying that they want for their people. If we do not have government ownership, we will not sustain the gains that we can make, and it has to be grounded in the voices of women. Spotlight Initiative, we were launched in 2017 as, I always called it the Great Spotlight Experiment, because it was this idea that if you actually have money that you can invest in communities at scale that are oriented around national priorities, investing in women's rights organizations, but really considering all of the elements that need to be integrated all at once, the everything, everywhere, all at once approach, you can have impact. And we showed that you can have impact, and now we're showing that this impact can be sustained. So we know what works, we just need to take it to scale now.
Thank you very much, Erin. Seraphine, let me come to you. So what has worked in your view, what hasn't, and how do we make it work for the next decade?
Thank you very much. Maybe using the case of Sierra Leone, since I'm the UN resident coordinator in Sierra Leone, to showcase on all what they are talking in terms of global issues. Sierra Leone is a real case for addressing the issue on gender empowerment. And I would say when you look at the gender index, Sierra Leone is ranking 157 out of 164 countries. So you understand that we are still behind. And again, it's a question with multi-dimensions. We see when we go out today, leadership in Sierra Leone, they are progressive. They are really engaged to support women empowerment. They are trying to review policies and strategies. But we still need to do more, because there are things that are deep in the communities, and those are the ones sometimes we miss. We know that for Sierra Leone, 83% of women are affected by FGM. 30% of women getting married before 18. We also see more than 61%, the statistics are saying that they have gone through different gender-based violence, either domestic or sexual. So for us, we believe that maybe we need to shift in the way we address the issues. As Erin was saying, maybe move from project-based approach and think more on integrated approach. And that is because that's where we will be able to address the multifaceted issues that we see. Because you cannot say, if you do a project on female genital mutilation, you will miss the other part. So you need to have a combination of issues that you will be trying to address. So for us, we feel that, yes, there are challenges, but there are also opportunities for us to rewrite the narrative for women and girls. And today with the Spotlight initiative, and that's why I'm here today, because we are just launching one. We launched it in June, and we hope that it will be a tool for us to go in deep on what have been done in Sierra Leone. Because it's going to look at the root causes of the issues, but also to see how we can address the laws and institutions' capacity, because it's way from the leadership to the community to the local level. We need to have everybody engaged without forgetting those that are concerned, the women themselves, the leaders, the local leaders, the traditional leaders who have the voice in the communities are the ones who are going to make things change. So I believe we need to look more on transformative approach. And that is what I think Spotlights is bringing in Sierra Leone. And again, there's no way you can say a quick fix approach. And also no one approach
and no
will
one
be
size fits
fit
all
for
approach.
everybody.
Absolutely.
So we need to understand the context and act accordingly. Thank you.
No quick fix approach, as you said, and not one size fits all approach. Thank you very much for that, Seraphine. Sheikha Haya Al-Thani, thank you so much. Let me come back to you and ask you a bit more about what QFFD has been doing, the Qatar Fund for Development. There is, of course, the Women in Conflict Zones initiative, which you're partnering with the Spotlight initiative on. But on the investing in women's empowerment, especially economic empowerment, there are still gaps when it comes to investing in that. Why do you think that is so essential in achieving the SDGs, and what has QFFD been doing in that regard?
Truly, our partnership is a pleasure for us, and it's helping us deliver on a promise that we made a while ago. And so working with partners is a key sort of vehicle for us to move our objectives and to achieve our vision for equity and for accessibility of all, and social inclusion at its core is about that. So it's partnerships to begin with, but also Qatar Fund for Development has a 7 billion portfolio of development globally. Over 100 countries have been, recipients in some capacity of our initiatives. And so, to spare you or to spare the dear audience here to inundate you on all of the projects that we've done, maybe I can highlight a few that have been truly effective in their scope. We have an ongoing partnership with Turquoise Mountain in Afghanistan, in which women weavers are supported and encouraged to develop their trade and to then provide them with access to the global market, which is quite substantial in its nature. And that is exactly what we try to do. We try to help women help themselves and for them to feel secure in their own self. And, touching upon ideas about rape as a weapon of war, fundamentally, what those people are doing, they know that, you know, by breaking those women, they're going to break society for the long term. And what we do at Qatar Fund for Development is what we flip that. You know, we know that if by empowering women, we empower entire societies. And so we actively pursue projects that are able to do that. And you know,
what do you prioritize in those projects?
Exactly that.
What are your priorities?
Oh, priorities. We have specific priorities. We have sectors of priority, which are the healthcare, education, and economic empowerment, which is, of course, very appropriate here. But if you allow me, you know, there's a point that was raised a few days ago by members of WFP. They were talking about how women rarely default on loans. And we've been, you know, thinking about this issue for a while. And of course, part of the reason why women rarely default is because access to loans is so hard for them that by the time that they are, you know, granted a loan, they're probably in the best position to do it, you know, so they're limited in access to begin with. But also women are extremely responsible. You know, they know that their decisions will affect the entire community. They understand that when they default on a loan, and that doesn't only affect them, it affects their family, their household, their community. And so when you empower women, when you address them in that sense, you know that the entire community will also benefit from that.
All right, Erin, would you like to add to what Ms. Althani was saying there?
Yeah. So, I mean, when we look at an initiative like Spotlight Initiative, we were given a gift, and for me, I had been working on issues of ending violence against women and girls for nearly 20 years when I took this job, and so to be able to work on a program where I had a 500 million euro budget, I thought, oh my gosh, I mean, it was both a gift and also very overwhelming. But the reality was we had a chance here to really think, okay, what's going to have the most transformative impact? And we thought, okay, prevention, right? The most important thing we can do is ensure that we are sowing the seeds for communities to truly recognize for themselves in an organic, honest way what needs to happen to prevent violence before it occurs.
Right.
So we've really invested in that,
Right.
in whatever way made sense in that context. And then we looked at what does systems change look like, right? So we elevated the issue, and many of the countries we entered into political compacts with heads of state, so prime ministers or presidents, and then at the governance level in a country, we had ministers of finance sitting around the table, or ministers of defense, in addition to the gender ministers. So we weren't sidelining those who had the direct authority on women's issues in the country. They were also very present, but we were elevating it and ensuring there was political accountability in a country and systems-wide response so that we had that. And then really, essentially, we were investing directly in women's rights organizations and in marginalized groups so that they were also at the table with the political actors who are making decisions. In some countries, this was the first time for decades that you had governments and civil society sitting together in a safe space, talking about often very politicized issues. And they were often so grateful. And I think this is the value add of the UN. And truly the value add of centering these programs with UN resident coordinators. And for those who aren't very familiar with the UN system, UN resident coordinators are the UN Secretary General representatives in the country. So they're the UN authority in the country, and they have the ability to really bridge all of these disparate groups and really kind of say, bring the government and civil society and the different elements of the UN together in service to the social good of a country. And that's what Spotlight Initiative was really able to do so effectively for really sustainable results.
Right, and let me just pick up on that, because you've mentioned how the Spotlight Initiative is not just about immediate change, but changing the systems itself. And the partnerships between the government and the different actors on the ground that you talk about. Where have you seen it succeed the most in terms of embedding it into their national systems? Where has that worked the most, you think?
Yeah, thank you. So it's interesting because we very intentionally we invested in 26 countries, and then we had 5 regional programs, and we chose a range of countries because we wanted to see how the model would work in countries like Argentina and in countries like Afghanistan. How does the model work in this very wide range of contexts? And what we found is that the model works everywhere. Not the same everywhere, but it works everywhere. We were actually very surprised by that. And we learned tremendous lessons. Now, in terms of sustainability, we're just completing a sustainability assessment now. And we also were very curious because many of these, Argentina is a great example, many governments have changed in the life course of Spotlight Initiative. This happened during the programs, but also following the programs, and they're not always as receptive to what we're doing. But the seeds that were planted during the lifespan of Spotlight Initiative, our first phase of program, so that first 500 million I mentioned, ended at the end of 2023. So 2 years on, we're seeing that in 97% of our programs, we're still seeing sustained outcomes. This includes in countries like Afghanistan, and actually significant sustained outcomes in Afghanistan, not light touch outcomes. And what we're seeing there is that the greatest sustainability came from working with local leaders and local civil society who continue to engage and implement the programs that we've put in place there. We're seeing laws and policies that were passed during the life course of our first 5 years being implemented at community level now with no additional funding. And this is really important in a resource-constrained environment. There's no resources coming into these countries now, necessarily. No external resources, I should say. There's domestic resources, and I think this is a massive untapped potential that we have. We did a study on domestic resource mobilization, and in 4 countries alone, we saw that Spotlight Initiative contributed to 50 million in additional domestic resources going to the issue of ending violence against women and girls. So there's a lot we can do here to ensure that domestic resources are also helping to sustain the gains that we're making.
Thank you so much, Erin. Seraphine, let me come to you. In your first intervention, you highlighted the importance of working holistically with all the stakeholders, the governments, the community leaders, the UN and civil society. And you gave the example of Sierra Leone, of course, where you work and how it's worked and it's been embedded with the national development priorities. But in terms of making sure that the resources are there, what more do you think can governments, whether it's in Sierra Leone or the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, in fact, do to ensure that these local women organizations that exist on the ground and that are doing tremendous work can have the resources and influence they need?
Yep. I would say maybe Evan was saying, where is it going to work? Maybe Sierra Leone will be the one, because we really see the leadership commitment to do it, and that's what we need. Because we are there to support. We are bringing expertise. We are there to build capacities, but we need the leadership to have that mindset. And that is the starting point for our program. We see from the president, the chief minister, the local government, everybody is committed to ending gender-based violence. So then you think that commitment is being mainstreamed through policies and strategies, but we need the implementation of those strategies. And that is where partnership comes, the real ones, not just partnering between donors and government, but thinking of those who can make change, real change, transformative change in the communities. And then those are the women's movement. And Sierra Leone has a lot. And we hope that they will be able to really support on the agenda of ending gender-based violence. We also have specialized agencies. We know that UN Women, UNFPA, UNDP, everybody in their own mandate will support the contribution to the implementation of the program, because it's a multi-dimensional program. When we talk about gender-based violence, we just think maybe of the survivors, but we don't think of the causes. And then that's when we go deep and see that if those sitting in the communities are not aware of what is happening, you sit there in Freetown and we will not see anything changing. Even if we get resources, they will be spent, but there will be no results.
Yeah.
So for us, we believe in genuine partnership with those women who can go and talk to their daughters and sisters, but also make themselves participate in the process. And we did it even during the preparation of the project.
Right.
It was not just something we took from spotlights, but we did do consultations from Freetown to the regions, and we got all their. We hope we have understood their needs, but we are going to still use the participation approach for the implementation of the program.
Okay, thank you so much, Seraphine. Ladies, before we bring in some audience questions, I'd like to ask each one of you a final question. If you can answer in a minute or so we can get some audience questions in, that would be great. Haya, let me start with you. So as we look ahead from the Doha Political Declaration, what is your one call to action to governments? What must change now to build these inclusive and equitable societies that we all aspire to have, that put women and girls at the center of sustainable development?
I mean, you said it. Get governments to put women center in all their policies and their developmental initiatives. That's key. But also governments such as Qatar, need to really play their role in embedding those initiatives within their national development strategies, and then reflecting that in any financial financial planning that they have to correlate. And I would say just on the Doha Political Declaration, there's a lot of the points that are listed there call for action, but it's the document as a whole that needs to be implemented. And then we have, so the Doha Program of Action, the Doha Political Declaration says the what, and then we have things like the Finance for Development in Seville that set the how. And bringing those initiatives together and working hand in hand with the financial element and the vision and the call for action is what's going to enact change going forward.
Okay, Erin, I'll come to you next. So your call to action after Doha.
Great. DSG actually said it perfectly. I mean, I think the emphatic political will is huge. I mean, governments coming out resoundingly in support of their women with a zero tolerance approach to violence, with no embarrassment, no shame. I think we have to understand no government, no people want violence against women in their communities. That has to be our baseline. If we go into programming with that understanding, a shared understanding, then we are already 90% of the way there. It has been so frustrating to me to hear from some very powerful governments this scarcity mentality in this moment of funding lack, when they hold so much power. And the great exception to this is Qatar right now, and I want to really appreciate that, because it's been a silver lining in this moment. But so many others, I think we all hold so much power in this moment to really, at a minimum, be bold in our commitment to women, and it's so necessary, and it's so powerful.
Thank you so much, Erin. Seraphine, your call to action. What needs to change now to build these more inclusive and equitable societies?
My call would be to really think of dismantling those systems that are still perpetuating gender-based violence. And to do it, you cannot do it in silo. We have to do it together, to act as all stakeholders And when we say stakeholders, sometimes we think of government and maybe UN, but it's whoever has a voice will have to join the process, because it's important, and it's really, I would say, harmful to be hearing that women are still living in fear of being raped, of being, affected by domestic violence. But to this, so, and I think the DSG just mentioned something. Most of the time, we do talk about it, but we don't know what we are talking about. So data is key for evidence strategies. We need really to understand what we are doing, where we are coming from, and where we want to go. And then, last, what I started with,
Right.
to empower women-led associations, because they are mostly closer to the communities, and to be really, I would say, more effective. We also need those policies to be really implemented. So we need funds. We need more funds.
It all comes
I'm
back to
talking
the
about
funds, doesn't it?
spotlights, but if I'm talking about it, it's only few regions
Right.
out of many regions that we would have loved to
Yeah.
cover.
It
So
definitely
more
needs to be
funding
expanded.
for more actions.
Thank you so much, Seraphine. Thank you, ladies, for your rich insight, really, in bringing your expertise into this conversation. Please, a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much. We're going to take a few questions from the audience. Please keep your interventions brief. Questions, not remarks, if possible, so that we can have as many as possible. The lady in the front row, please. Can we give her a microphone, please? Yes, it's coming to you. It's coming.
Thank you. Our panelists were all outstanding. I am Evelyn Kilmian, and I've worked at a grassroots level in Côte d'Ivoire, and our mission is educate girls and women to break the cycle of fill in the blank. So here's my question. What is being done, and this is both for Qatar and Qatar Funds and also Project Spotlight, what is being done at a grassroots level to ensure that grassroots leaders, the women groups that we're talking about, are having direct access to sustainable capitals and resources while working in places where trust still needs to be rebuilt with the systems that have been in place for so long?
That
Thank
is
you.
a great question. Haya, would you like to take it? And then Erin.
Well, first of all, building trust is quite important, and we do that through multiple ways. But just to talk about access, maybe that's important, because at Qatar Fund for Development, everyone has access to the fund in terms of sending us their voices, their projects, their proposals. We have an expression of interest portal that actually allows anyone to submit any proposals through that, and each one of the proposals that are sent and submitted are looked at by a committee, so no proposal is neglected. And so that's access, and providing people with access is fundamental to our operation. But also, as you said, building trust and building cooperation, and we always champion for grassroots initiatives to be included. We work with entities like the UN that put grassroots initiatives and entities at the heart of their projects on the ground. And so through working with this multilateral system that emphasizes grassroots initiatives is a way in which we try to at least support the process.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Haya, for that. Erin, your turn.
Great. It's
It's a great question, isn't it? How do
fantastic-
you
it's
make
a
sure the people
fantastic
who
question.
need the funds the most have direct access to it?
I mean, this could be its own panel. I will really try to keep it brief. Spotlight Initiative has done actually quite a lot to center the needs of grassroots entities. And for the UN, this is not always an easy thing. And I'm not just saying this because Sima Bahu's just walked in the room, but we have really worked so closely with our wonderful dear partner UN Women, who has the really authority and expertise in the UN system on work with civil society to understand how the UN can do better to invest in grassroots organizations. And there's been a few things we've done. We actually have, Spotlight developed a grassroots action plan early on in our tenure that looked at the ways in which we could better resource grassroots entities. And we also, you may know this or may not, we also ensure that grassroots organizations, civil society organizations, are at every level of our governance as a trust-building exercise. So they sit with the DSG and with Edie Bahus on our advisory board. They sit on our operational steering committee at both global, regional, and national level. That's where all decisions get made, including on budgets. And they form an advisory board for us, so they advise me on all major decisions that I make, on all major decisions the DSG makes, on all major decisions that the resident coordinators make throughout the program cycle. So very much involved in everything that we do, and that's a trust-building exercise as well. And I think all leadership that engage with them have committed to being transparent. What can we do? What can't we do? And why? What are the roadblocks that we face? Because the UN has roadblocks. And I think it's actually really important to explain the why. Not just, oh, we can't do it, but this is why. And sometimes co-create solutions to that, actually. Bring them into understanding that. So at the moment, we're working with, in partnership with the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women, with UN Women, and with a range of other UN partners to develop a UN funding framework to identify the good practices in the UN system for getting more money to grassroots entities and to elevate that into a policy framework that can be picked up across the UN in line with UN reform, in line with UN 80, so that more grassroots entities who get money through the UN can get it better, more unrestricted, more core resourcing. We're still working on building trust. We know that this is a marathon, not a sprint, but anyway, thank you. It's a great question.
Thank you so much, Erin. We'll take another question. There's a young lady here in the front row. I think she's very keen on asking a question. Go ahead.
Firstly, a big congratulations to all the panelists to share their amazing insights on women empowerment and work towards SDG 5. And it's not just like that, it's about the world and overall social development. So I'm Kiara Kaur, 9 years old. I'm a young SDG advocate in the region and also the young speaker at Commission on Status of Women 68 at United Nations. So you know the problem, I know the problem, but there's a large population that does not know about what are their rights and how they are unaware and they can't support themselves. So my question to all of the panelists is that what do you believe which is the most effective action on an individual scale, especially for a young girl like me, to take in their daily life, to challenge and change discriminatory gender norms, and also advocate more efficiently? Thank you.
That is such a great question. Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you. Haya, you would like to go first? What can young people do individually? What can we do at the individual level to address this issue of...
I mean, using your voice. You amazed us all, but using your voice and advocating for yourself first and for your community second is important. But, you know, just pushing yourself, I think. But we're all amazed by yourself and by your contribution, but by the question. So I'll leave it to my fellow panelists, maybe.
Erin.
Oh my gosh, I'm so impressed with you. I have a 10-year-old at home. Can you guys just be best friends, please? I'm serious. You're amazing. So being a role model, I think in small ways. I talk to my daughter about this all the time. I mean, she calls out the boys in her classroom for their bad behavior, right? It starts there. We have a lot of work to do with our young boys. I'm just saying. And it is not on you guys, by the way. I'm not putting this on your shoulders. But since you asked, if you want, I think it's okay to say, that's not cool. So my daughter has said that when she's seen boys acting badly. She said, that's not cool, just like that. And that's a great thing to do.
As Haya said, use your voice, right? Seraphine, would you like to
Yeah, I
address
would
that?
add, because for me it really speaks to our program, and I feel those are the kind of partnership we are looking for. And in my team of agencies implementing, UNICEF is part of the 4 agencies. So to have focus groups on young girls, and when we hear voices like you, we know that when you go home, you will talk to your parents and they will understand. And you know, for example, the issue of female genital mutilation, they are happening to children who are even younger than you. So hearing from somebody at the same age will be empowering children to also speak from themselves. So those are the partnerships we are looking for, and we are going to strengthen the capacities, because sometimes it's also, they consider that they are still young, but they need maybe to be a little bit, get some skills, so that they can elevate their voices higher.
Mentorship is
So we are
important
happy to have
in these
you
cases.
in this
Thank you so
role.
much. We'll take one more question. We're going to take a gentleman, because I think it's important also to have the men as part of the conversation, right? No pressure, but the microphone, please. The gentleman in the front row. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Chasey Negbedium. I'm an advocate for menopause and menstrual health care. But truly, my question today is, if you go to the Spotlight Initiative website, you will see a civil society funding dashboard. And there are millions of civil society who comes to this space every day seeking funding. I'm just asking the panels right now, what do you think AI tools recently, because with the era of artificial intelligence now, Gemini, GPT, and you also mentioned expression of interest. And people in the room right now would like to bombard you at the door right now to say, can you give me the next $1 million? I'm just saying, how do we come to a point whereby these tools can help us identify this civil society that needs this money, making sure it's not a backdoor channel where they can access the right funding, and media most especially. What do you think the media can do? I'm sure Foley is from Al Jazeera, spotlighting majorly these initiatives in the space. Thank you.
Haya? I think that question was addressed to you directly.
Well, first of all, I'll say on the media question, you know, Qatar has positioned itself long ago as an advocate of the media and the free media, to be specific. And so we always rely on free and independent media to advocate, but we also work with them as partners when there are voices that we need, you know, to be heard. And so that's on the media. But on AI and technology, we at the fund are really grappling with it right now, because it's still in we're in uncharted waters. And we are very much committed to working with it and not around it or against it. And so AI has already proven quite beneficial and has scaled up a lot of developmental initiatives globally. And we're looking at those initiatives and how we can interact as a developmental agency and help better support those communities that can benefit from these advances. So, you know, to answer your questions, just to support them, to be aware, to remain relevant in that context is quite important.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Haya. Do you want to add to that? Yeah.
Very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly.
I have 2 really quick things. So just on kind of how do we make sure we have fair and equitable access to resources from civil society, that there's no backdoor channeling, because I think it's a really important question. This was part of our grassroots action plan that we developed with Spotlight Initiative. We actually, one of the things we recognized historically is that there was a pattern in many UN programs of kind of contracting the same NGOs over and over and over again. And so when Spotlight Initiative was launched, we actually begged and pleaded and demanded, and actually it was very well received, to say, please go outside the box. Please try to find the non-usual partners. With the Leave No One Behind mandate, this was particularly important. And so the agencies actually really picked up the mantle on this, and agencies like UN Women in the room, but UNFPA, UNICEF, UNDP, IOM, UNHCR, all of the agencies who work with us, we have 13 agencies, went deep into the field socialized the call for proposals, invited calls for proposals in local languages, handwritten proposals. I mean, really, it was work. But that way we made sure, and we spent time saying, this is how you apply for UN funding. We did workshops, you know, to really make sure that we got a large amount. And we had, I think it was 47%, I'm not gonna get the data right because I don't have it in front of me, brand new, never before partners to the UN coming into Spotlight Initiative. So speaking of data, before I get off the stage, fresh off the presses, we are launching today, and as a thank you to all of you who are here, our impact report. We're handing it out. It is being launched today by the DSG in just a little bit, like about an hour. About an hour. This is our 2025 impact report. It has lots of data in here, including lots of data on our work with civil society. Please grab a copy by our wonderful Koi Adeboye, who happens to match our impact report today. I don't know if that's just a coincidence, but you can't miss him. So please grab a copy on your way out. But don't leave yet, because we still have an amazing speaker.
It's not the end yet. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for the great questions. Thank you, Haya. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Seraphine, for such a great conversation. Please, a round of applause for our distinguished panelists. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, before we end, to conclude the session today, it's my privilege to welcome Seema Bahous, the Executive Director of UN Women, to give the closing remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all of you. And I'm happy to be here and to be in this space that is so empowering for women, for girls, for everyone who is on this agenda day in, day out. I chose to speak, to close this event, to speak on the importance of social protection. And I would like to say that 30 years ago, the Copenhagen Declaration and Platform for Action highlighted the feminization of poverty, and it acknowledged, as you all know, that gender equality is a key pathway to ending poverty. So that same year, also the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action reiterated that commitment and affirmed that women's economic empowerment is essential for sustainable development. So that is important for us to frame as we move forward together, but as also we close this session. So since then, I'd like to highlight the social protection has proven a powerful lever for development and for progress. And it is a safeguard against instability and disruption, and it enables poor women and girls to better navigate critical life course events such as having a child or a job loss or entering old age. And we've spent some time today, actually, and yesterday talking about old age and aging and how aging and old age is also part and parcel of this women's agenda as well, and that we really need to take care of that, as well as, of course, young girls and everyone else, but also boys and men. But I also want to say that social cohesion paves the way out of poverty when aligned with gender-responsive employment policies and public services, including education, health, child, and long-term care. And all these issues are very closely related to the Spotlight initiative and what we are doing together, all of us, Spotlight and all the UN sister agencies, including UN Women. So UN Women's recent survey on the role of women in development focused on this topic, which is the social protection. It offers a policy agenda for gender-responsive social protection. And I will highlight 3 recommendations from that survey. First, we must close the gender gap in social protection systems, policies, and programs, and that is important. This includes extending coverage to the world's 740 million women in informal employment. For example, what UN Women is doing in northern Senegal, female farmer producers, for example, successfully lobbying of government. They saw over 1,300 rural women gain access to health insurance for themselves and some 7,000 household members as well. So it is important to make that link between all the initiatives that work to help women's health become better, to work against violence against women in general, and to work against all the issues that stop women from moving forward or distract women's path to moving forward by looking at different examples in different areas of work that help that particular path. The second is we must integrate social protection with other policies, including gender-responsive employment and care work and care policies as well. Also, we have spent a number of hours this 3 days talking about the care economy and how the care economy empowers women and how care economy improves women's health, women's education, women's participation, women's leadership in society. So all these issues are also quite related. From UN Women's perspective, and an example in such countries like Albania, Colombia, Kenya, Nepal, UN Women supports the development of integrated care systems that respond to critical care needs across the life course of women and support a fairer distribution of care responsibilities, promoting decent jobs in the paid care sector. Also, that is important for women to understand that none of their work will go unpaid one way or the other, and that we know that women bear the responsibility of care work. Nothing more than the COVID pandemic showed us how much care work was done by women unpaid. And this is something that also, it affects their health, it affects their opportunities, it affects their income. And of course, it contributes positively to the family as well, but we have to find that balance so that women are paid for what they do. At the same time, their families are happy and well cared for. So this balance, we really need to look at it and see how best we can do it. The third outcome of the study we did is we must center women's rights and women's needs into social protection in conflict crises. And you know how much violence women suffer from conflict crises. We know how much poverty they have. We know how much displacement, how much agony, pain, etc., but also how much they care for their families and want to build peace and want to build stability as well. So important that we help women to do that because that affects their whole well-being as well. For example, the UN Women's Oasis centers in Jordan support women and girls in the growing refugee and displaced populations there by giving cash for work, employment opportunities. So gender-based violence services as well are provided, and leadership and civic engagement activities. These all build solidarity by covering both refugees and host communities. And in those areas also covering both the issues that we need to tackle for women, refugees are equally important to those of the host communities and the women who live in the host communities when there are refugees and displaced people who need also help and support from the local community and the host community, but also there are issues that come up with that. Most of the time, if not all the time, it is women who keep the peace, it is women who provide, it is women who bring all the necessary needs for that, and we need to also continue to look at that and see how we can deal with it. So I guess my final message to all of you is we know that where women lead and where women enjoy the protection they deserve, where social protection systems intentionally create opportunities that women and girls can seize, always with there is where poverty ends. This is where life becomes better, and this is where progress lies for them to move forward. At UN Women, we look forward to walking that path with all of you and to continuing to help push, for gender equality forward. We know that there is a lot of backlash and a lot of pullback against gender equality and women's empowerment, but what we are calling for is we continue to push back against the pushback, but also to push forward for all women and girls. I want to thank you so much for this session, and to say bravo and congratulations to all of you for all the good work that you are doing for women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edie Bahous. Thank you, everyone, for coming. A special thanks to our partners at the Qatar Fund for Development. Thank you. Everyone, please, on your way out, this is brand new. The reports are not even out yet. They will be out in about 45 minutes, so grab a copy, only limited copies. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of the summit. Thank you.